who a person really says they are, right? Everything from the ID down to the identity, biometrics, authenticating using facial biometrics or fingerprints, down to partnering with companies like Compliant Advantage to provide AML services in a single pane of glass through one platform, as well as other aspects on CFT, as well as, video KYC, for instance. So the approach for Jumio is quite unique in the sense that we recognize the limitations of purely AI platforms for the eKYC market today, which is why we have both an automated service as well as a hybrid service that encapsulates both AI, ML, computer vision, as well as live human verification experts to help supplement the process to ensure that the KYC that we do for our clients are considered, bank grade, highly secure, extremely compliant to various regulatory standards, whether you're talking about HKMA, MAS, Bank Negara, for instance, right? And because we're dealing with PII data, we do ensure the highest level of security in the sense that we are PCI DSS level 1 compliant, ISO 27001 compliant, in which the company itself goes through an annual audit to ensure that we maintain those certifications. The experience that we have covers across a wide range of industries. Some of the more common names you see here, HSBC, CIMB Bank in the Philippines, which is a fully digital bank. You may have used Jumio in some way or form before, just that we're usually white people. So people like TransferWise, if you've been to a Reebok office, for instance, they all run Jumio's identity verification platform on the back end. So if we look at fraud, which is the key topic of the day, right, and we look across the regions, right, and namely North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific, you're going to see that the fraud rates differ quite substantially across the regions, right, with APAC easily having close to double the type of new account fraud as compared to North America or Europe. And there's a couple of factors for it, which we can delve in a separate session. But if we dig a little bit further and look at where the fraud is happening, specific to industries, right, you're going to see financial services for sure. More recently, with the boom in crypto, it's happening a lot in the crypto exchanges, crypto industry, gaming as well as services. So there are some stuff in the gig economy, sharing economy, travel, entertainment as well. But I think mainly because of the focus on the movement of fiat currency, you're going to see it more in the other industries. Type of fraud trends, most common ones, new account takeover. What we kind of see is that the trend for accounts that are just created in 1 or 2 days have a high susceptibility to having an account takeover, which is why that initial onboarding is pretty important. Synthetic identity fraud, where you kind of take different elements to come up with and piece together a fake identity to create an account, is also on the rise. And if you look at how you allow your customers to onboard, allowing the channel of manually uploading in a PNG format or a JPEG format of an ID photo, it's more susceptible to fraud because they are able to, Photoshop it a lot more accurately. If you split AKYC, we look essentially into the document fraud, which is, in the case of Malaysia, like a My Card, a passport, for instance, where fraudsters tend to manipulate stuff like, date of birth, the document number, they place their own photo on top so they can pass the selfie checks, they take a digital copy, black and white photocopy. Those are the common type of document frauds that we see across the region. And the other one that you're going to see is selfie-based fraud. So most of the time, I think some of you will probably have experienced it, is, you need to take a selfie where there's a match against the government issue ID. So very common, right? They print a piece of paper, they take someone else's ID that they stole to try and pass it off as a selfie, or they manipulate a selfie, for instance. Which is why there's this new trend of creating deepfakes, and you can kind of go and check it out online for deepfakes, where you put someone's face in, you can make them blink, look left, look right, that sort of thing, which is why that security of that aspect is increasingly important. How Jumio does it? Very simple. We get the customer to send a front and back of the government issue ID. We perform a number of checks to make sure that the government issue ID is authentic. And then we ask the customer to take a selfie with liveness to make sure it's the same customer and a live customer. Typical flows that you're going to see, right? This is a very, very basic one where your user signs up, and then Jumio helps with the identity verification, AML checks. And then based on the different year marks and risk scoring, you'll tend to onboard or not for the customer, where you demarcate them into, low risk, high risk, medium risk. Or you have something that's a little bit more comprehensive, where you have all of that, and you add on stuff like address checks to check whether if an EPF statement that's being uploaded, the address there is a real address or not, or whether the person is really staying at the address, or you have something that has fraud cases around the identifiers of whether a phone number is new or old, for instance. Which is why for Jumio, at the end of the day, what we are trying to build is an end-to-end platform that really encapsulates everything about a person, right? Whether it's the address or the identity based on biometrics, or new trends of fraud, for instance, that are happening, or you connect to various databases, AML or government databases, and you look at fraud signals as well, as such as email longevity, phone number longevity, and then at the very base of the platform, it's really focused around user experience for digital onboarding, AI ML, which we'll talk about later in one of the topics, hopefully based on real world data, global coverage, because digital transformation, everybody's going regional global, and it's highly secured, it's recognized across the globe. So thanks for that. That's a quick intro on what I see from fraud and Jumio. Thank you, Fang.
Very interesting, particularly on the deepfake stuff, right? That's all the stuff which you see on Facebook, but that's the world these days. Next, I'm going to have an introduction for Ardanta Jafar, the head of Indonesia and Malaysia for IKATA. Now, Ardanta has been with that position with IKATA for the risk and data space for the last 5 years. She has specialized in financial data and KYC AML before moving into fraud. Her main expertise is in financial institution and digital banks and fintech, but also has experience in other verticals across the region. So she'll be joining us in the panel session later on, and very interested to learn more about her and her views on IKATA. Next, we have Heather Tan. She's the commercial director at Comply Advantage, and they do quite a number of work with Jumio as well. And Heather has been in that position with a multi-award winning AML RegTech. She is a certified anti-money laundering specialist with a decade of experience in the risk and compliance space. Heather applies her domain expertise to helping businesses drive efficiencies across processes and improve the customer experience. Prior to joining Comply Advantage, Heather had roles in Refinitiv and Dow Jones, where she had been appointed to establish the presence in the corporate and fintech sectors. Heather, over to you.
Thanks, Fang. Hi, everyone. Just sharing my screen here. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Heather, and I appreciate the introduction, and it's my pleasure to be speaking to you all today. So I oversee the Comply Advantage business here in Malaysia and Singapore. And as Fang mentioned, I have a decade of experience working with a lot of corporations and financial institutions within the region to help establish and reinvent some of their risk and compliance processes. Just a little bit about Comply Advantage, so Fang Ming introduced us as a multi-award winning RegTech. I think the biggest takeaway for us is that we've been very proud to have been recognized by the World Economic Forum for having a real impact in the compliance industry, in the 7 years or so that we've been operating. It's fighting financial crime and putting a stop to terrorism is really in our DNA. And we do this by doing a couple of things very well. So the first is, as Gabriel's already mentioned, a lot of the risk process begins when you first onboard a customer and identify, the customer. We then come in as a second piece to, do further checks on whether or not that customer is a good or bad customer, and if they pose any kind of risks to you. In some cases, and in Malaysia specifically, we see a lot of rise in politically exposed persons bearing, new threats, right, and risks. It doesn't mean to say if you're a politician, you're a bad person, but for sure, there are more complicated type of regulations around dealing with politicians. So that just forms one aspect of what Comply Advantage does. Our focus is in really helping regulated entities to protect their businesses from financial losses as a result of regulatory breaches, fines, reputational damage. If you're a listed company, these things can also have a huge impact on your share price. And also just looking at any other kinds of high-risk activities within your network, right? This goes into two key areas of what we do. First is in identifying if a customer is bearing any sort of potential sanctions, bribery and corruption, or reputational risk. The second is in helping the companies that we work with stay up to date in terms of changes in their third-party relationship. So any kind of suspicious behaviors in the way their customers are transacting or with whom they transact. Just a high-level introduction of the type of clients that we service around the world. While we do work with a lot of financial institutions, the likes of banks and insurance companies, in the more recent years, our focus has been also in working with fintechs, payment companies, digibanks, as well as technology companies like telcos and other kinds of high-risk corporates. A lot of the companies within the financial sectors are heavily regulated. But by and large, actually, people don't realize that outside of the financial industry, any company that touches or has dealings with a US party would automatically be subject to sanctions. In terms of bribery and corruption as well, the EU, the US, and in this part of Asia, we also have bribery and corruption regimes. And if you're looking at completely sort of a step away from the financial industry, looking at corporates, even within manufacturing, healthcare type of services, we do also see other types of regulatory regimes, including modern day child slavery. So those are just some key areas that we help clients with. And just very lastly, as a takeaway, I think the three things that we're most recognized for doing is one, helping customers to achieve a very high level of automation. So we have here from Visa directly that we've been actually working with them to achieve the industry's highest straight-through processing rate for transaction monitoring. I think any one of us here, who holds a Visa card or on your phone will not have any complaints in terms of, the speed of transactions. And we play that role in helping them look at the regulators, their clients, the network partners, and all of their stakeholders, and all of the risks and high levels of standards that are required from them as a company and deliver on that. We've also helped Santander Bank to go on and win a Cillian Award by helping them cut down their customer onboarding time by about 75 to 80%. When a client first signs up with them, it used to be a 2-week process. Now it's a 2-day process. And the very last piece is, something that we're very proud of. In Malaysia, there's a huge shift towards a digital banking. And we were able to help Curve, a digibank client, to reduce their overall, client onboarding time by about 75%. So even as they scaled to have several million customers, they were still actually able to retain the same compliance team size. So that's just a little bit about Comply Advantage, and looking forward to speaking to you guys after this.
Very good. Thank you, Heather, for that. I guess now's the time for us to move into the panel session. And for this, I'd like to introduce our moderator, my co-founder at Fort Ninja. Now, Jenna has been in this startup for the last 18 months or so. It's a fast-tracking, fast-growth cybersecurity company that seeks to fill the talent drought in the space, particularly for the APAC region. Prior to stepping into the fintech world, she was a lawyer, a partner at one of the local Malaysian firms, with experience in running the law firm, dealt with corporate litigation, human rights, and family law matters. Among the achievements Jenna has had is the top of influencers, 14 influencers in Malaysia, 40 under 40, top 100 women fintech global, two years in a row, 2019 and 2021, and the co-author of the RegTech book and the fintech book. I'll let Jenna take over to make introductions to Charmaine and Angkor today. Jenna?
Hi, I would like to also welcome Ankur. Ankur is actually in Aspirasi/Axiata. And we also have Charmaine from Maybank. So she sits as a head of Strategic Digital Alliance. So if you could have Charmaine and Ankur on stage as well with video. So maybe I'll pass back to Fang to do a bit of intro for both Ankur and Charmaine. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Let's start with Angkor. Now, Angkor is the Regional Director of Business Development and Operations at Aspirasi, Axiata Digital Cattle. He's helped build its lending and insurance from ground zero for the digital company in the region. Today, Aspirasi is one of the leading digital microfinancing and microinsurance platforms in Malaysia and Indonesia. Aspirasi's ambitions to provide comprehensive digital financial services for the underserved and unserved segments in the region. Anko is a senior management professional and a seasoned entrepreneur with over 20 years experience managing businesses, portfolios, and teams in retail financial services across MNC banks, corporations, and SMEs. Now moving on to Charmaine. Charmaine is the head Strategic Digital Alliance at Maybank. She's a tech enthusiast with experience in business development and operations, mobile-first content and product development, and strategic digital initiatives. Her stellar record in the mobile contact sector and the telecommunications side has prepared her natural progression to Samsung Electronics, moving into the financial service industry by launching Samsung Pay in Malaysia. She's passionate about changing the conversation on banking through technology and partnerships. Currently heading a team focused on driving strategic digital alliances in Maybank, Charmaine believes in the power of collaboration and exploring untapped opportunities in the technology, which technology can bring. Back to you, Jenna.
Thank you. So I'd like to actually kickstart the panel session, calling Andanta, Ankur, Heather, Charmaine, Gabriel. And I think for the audience out there, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or Q&A, and I will address that after the panel session and addressing some of the questions that you have. So the first question, getting right to it, to the topic of today, identity and transaction threats, regulated industries. So I'd like to pull in Heather and Gabriel for the first question. What is the difference between identity and transaction threats? You can also pull in finance and non-finance fields. Maybe we'll switch to Heather first.
Yeah, sure. Happy to take the question. So in our experience, identity and transaction threats are very closely related in that often the lack of identity information or the inability to detect, fake identity use often contributes to transaction threats. So Gabriel has probably discussed, he's already a few examples of how difficult it is to detect the use of fake IDs, right? Just imagine in this scenario, if all the time, we're using our phones and being prompted by our smartphones to use our facial recognition function to download a new app or make a new purchase. And then imagine in a very different scenario where your identity was stolen and the number of security breaches that you and the merchants that you're trying to make purchases from, would be exposed to, right? So the need for good identity verification plays a crucial role in just protecting your business from exposure to transaction threats. Even when companies have been able to set up a strong identity verification mechanisms, transaction threats are still prevalent. As criminals are becoming, very sophisticated in disguising illicit transactions. So a simple example would be if a lone wolf terrorist were to decide to, just go online and buy different parts, right, from different e-commerce platforms to create a homemade bomb. Those kinds of scenarios would be extremely difficult to detect, but there are, smart use of technologies as well to look for risk involved in the smaller kinds of transactions. So I'd say the two actually go hand in hand, and it's just very important to make sure that we can gather the necessary data points so that we can tie all this information together.
Thanks, Heather. And what about Gabriel? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks. So very close to what I mentioned, right? It's very hard to differentiate the two because both are so closely interlinked. And I think on the financial side of things, we're all very well versed. I've heard lots of stories around it. But if you look at the other non-finance fields as well, right? For identity or transaction threats, very typically the latest one that we kind of saw last year was this thing called the SIM card swapping, right? Where it's very common, you can get your SIM card shipped to your house immediately. If you call and do some level of verification over the phone with the customer service operator, right? And that's where it becomes very dangerous because if you look at how you actually authorize certain transactions, right? It's through an SMS to have an OTP, for instance, which then goes on to your SIM card number. So how the fraudsters do it is they actually manage to trick the customer service operators to get a SIM card shipped to their address. They activate the SIM card. Then from then on, they have other ways of getting, the information from the person, and that's how they get the fraudulent transactions going through. Whether it's transfer money in, transfer money out, bouncing off different accounts, or even just to use it to, purchase different stuff. And then the person just says, "Oh shit, it's suddenly like thousands, hundred thousands of dollars gone from the account." So that's the more common one that we saw. But just to echo Heather, it's inherently intrinsically interlinked right now. So you need to have multiple layers of protection, one at the account opening phase, one at the authentication phase, and then you add the layers of protection in place to look at transactions being run through for each individual account, for each individual person and client. Thanks.
Thanks. And I think with both identity and transaction threats that are closely related, I would like to also pick Andanta from her experience, right? How many levels of protection and defense can an organization deploy? What do you think, Andanta?
I think it's a great question. And I think that's still questions that a lot of what I see as well as companies in ASEAN are discussing, right? Because actually there's no one size fits all. And when we talk about defense and protection, right, it really depends on the vertical, the lines of business, as well as product, and risk-based approach that each company has in each organization. And so take for an example, an e-commerce company, right, in Malaysia, who's probably selling like COVID masks. They might just require 1 to 2 layers of protection, where maybe like an Axiata or an AirAsia that's applying for a digital bank might actually require 6, maybe to 8 layers of defenses. And so commonly companies will depend for internal data, but as soon as they open to new markets or open a new line of business or product, internal data is not enough, especially for that defense and that protection. And so let's take that example again for the e-commerce company, right? So maybe that Malaysian e-commerce company might just integrate a simple compliance check as well as maybe a Jumio for eKYC. But maybe that digital bank would require an ICATA digital identity verification tool, a transaction monitoring from Compliant Vantage, as well as device fingerprinting for new data, for example, because their processes and requirement are really stringent. And so actually, it's more common now to incorporate what is called the layered approach, which is a combination of internal data as well as third-party data. And essentially, that layered approach is there to complement and enhance internal processes. So internal data is great, but coupled with a good quality third-party data provider, which might be difficult for companies to manage, by the way, is a powerful additional layer of protection.
Yes, Ananta, I like the fact that you go for a hybrid approach where internal data is good, but I think you're relying on external data because these organizations, they may have years of data that has been used for many years by many organizations globally. So what about Gabriel? Do you have any thoughts on this question on the level of defense and protection?
I think similar to what Adanta said, there's no one size fit all. At the end of the day, you really got to look what is your internal risk framework. Like, for example, the risk framework for a bank versus a fintech versus a crypto or a sharing economy or a telco could be really, really vastly different. And if you look at regulatory frameworks, standards, right, whether it's BNM, whether it's MAS, whether it's HKMA, the term that regulators love to use is take a risk-based approach, right? Whether it's EKYC, whether it's AML, whether it's CFT, right? So depending on how you want to do it, depending on what products you're launching as well, you could have different sort of frameworks for it. So for example, you could say, I will do an account opening with EKYC, add on AML on top of that, with CFT, and then adding on indicators such as longevity of a phone number, of a email, for instance. Look at different risk indicators for that, and then start to pack them into low risk, medium risk, high risk, right? Depending on your own framework. And then from then on, that becomes something that's more logical, a lot more organized for organizations to deploy that. Yeah.
Thank you. And Heather, do you have any input or thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree that it should be a risk-based approach and that there's no one size fits all. I say that there is still an element of truth from sort of the textbook kind of answer, which is looking at 3 lines of defense. The first being the management or process owners needing to understand the risk associated with their day-to-day operations, and then having the accountability for them as well as their team, ensuring that their team are trained and fully aware of the risks and how to look out for them and prevent these risks, right? But in that statement alone, the risk associated for each company can be so different, and the level of processes involved can also look very different. The second layer would be then to have the necessary kind of framework and policies in place as a first step, but also having the right kind of tools to support their overall policies in ensuring that these policies are effectively and efficiently executed on a day-to-day basis. Whereas the third line of defense would involve looking at an external party like an auditor, a regulator, to assess really the effectiveness and benchmark that against other kinds of peers within industry. But I think for me, the most important piece is just staying vigilant to changes within the organization. It could be when you launch a new product or when you enter a new market. There are different kinds of risks associated with those. And then also looking outside of the organization and just ensuring that all these lines of defense are constantly kept up to date and reflective of the changes and the risk appetite.
Thanks, Heather. And I think it's a lot there's a lot of levels that are needed and a very diversified approach from everyone. I'd like to also ask Charmaine. So Charmaine is currently in the finance and banking area, and also she's overseeing quite a lot of innovation and partnerships as well. So Charmaine, why is it important to defend and protect against these threats? Is it a factor of risk or false positive or negative that we fear? So this also is, we'd like to also hear from Andanta and Gabriel as well. But Charmaine, any thoughts on this? Why is it necessary to defend against all of this?
Well, I think my perspective, right? Basically, I mean, if you're talking about frauds, you're talking about identity theft or transaction risk and all that, right? It is definitely eventuality. It will happen to everyone, and it happens every day. I think, not just coming from a banking sector. If you look at different companies like gaming companies or entertainment companies, they get hacked all the time, right? And they actually get being requested for ransomware. So this is basically the reality of what's happening out there today. I mean, the moment that we are actually in the digital world, it is an eventuality of when we are being hacked. So there's no such thing as, because we don't do anything, we'll be safe. So therefore, it is always very important to take precautions to anticipate what's going to come our way. So it is not just, I mean, obviously, we actually serve so many customers. And actually, for example, if anything were to happen, so it would not only just create, like you're talking about the normal risk, but also a very major reputational risk that would actually be impacted on the organization. Yeah.
Thanks, Charmaine. And I think maybe you can hear maybe from Gabriel.
Sure. So I think Charmaine covered most of the risks and everything, but I think if we delve into the second part of the question around false positives or false negatives that we fear, right? And we kind of dissect it. If you think about the digital space, whether it's digital banking, e-commerce, and all that, at the end of the day, businesses are businesses, right? It's about customer acquisition, right? In this digital space. But at the same time, how do you then protect against fraud, right? And it's an eventuality, inevitability, which is why if you look at what the regulators say, right, they're very focused on this thing across Asia around this thing called the FAR rate, which is the false acceptance rate, right? So most regulators will give you a threshold, right? BNM says 5%, Hong Kong MAS, Banco Central Philippines, for instance, could range anywhere from 2 to 3%, right? So they do accept that there's going to be fraud there, right? So to protect the integrity of the financial system, to promote digital inclusion, they have that threshold there for a reason. So at the same time now, it's about how do you then convert customers through a digital flow while still maintaining that fraud protection range, right? So that's the hardest balance. And if you look at the digital banking space now, right, even where traditional banks go to it, we're no longer talking about that 5-minute account application, right? It used to be like, oh, how fast can I go through that process, right? It's about that 5-minute account opening now, right? From doing the identity verification down to the AML checks, down to the CFD checks, down to transaction rates, right? Can I then test it, right? And safely say that, hey, I'm okay with onboarding this customer, right? And as an overarching strategy, right, really look at maintaining that 5%, 3% regulator framework. So it's really a balance. Not going to change, but it's all about finding that balance right there. So yeah.
Thanks, Gabriel. And Andanta, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh my God, I just love that everyone's on the same page. I think Charmaine brought a really good point about making sure that we have a proactive approach. And like Gabriel is totally right? So I think it's extremely important to have defenses and protection against threat, because it only takes that one threat to actually impact your company reputation. It can impact your customer friction, which leads to customer lifetime value. And we can also talk about revenue loss to fraud or maybe to sanctions, for example, in compliance aspect, right? But a recent Google, Temasek, and Bain study have shown that actually 40 million new customers have joined and started transacting digitally just last year due to COVID. And 40 million is a lot that's a lot, just full stop. And I think a lot of the companies realize that it's an opportunity to acquire new customers onto their platform. But now they've also realized that they're susceptible to fraud, cybersecurity, EKYC processes, and et cetera. And so companies are struggling to go digital, right? It's impacted their customer acquisition or onboarding process and have been bleeding into their capital. So one of the topics that constantly come up with customers that I do speak to in ASEAN is essentially the balance of customer friction as well as false positives. Do we then just reject every customer that looks suspicious? What looks suspicious? What kind of data are we trying to essentially hone? What if they're good customers? How much fraud is actually coming onto the platform? So I guess to tie everything in, really, it's not a one size fits all. It does get better over time, but you need to have something implemented. And I'll just leave sort of this question and topic so we can move on to the next one with some statistics that I think is quite thought-provoking. So 30 to 40% of the time, when a customer is falsely declined, so if you and I come into a platform and they think that we are fraud and they reject us, 30 to 40% of the time, the customer will not come back on that platform. And 70% of customers that have experienced fraud on a platform will not come back to that platform.
I think that's an interesting data, Andanta. And I think what you mentioned, 40 million new users last year, that's really huge. And if an organization is handling that amount of onboarding and accepting account opening as well, I think it's also quite daunting for them, because are you letting some of them slip through the cracks? I think that's the other question, because you may be, I guess you may be penalized by the regulators if something happened. You will only
Absolutely.
know that later on, not at
Exactly.
account opening.
Exactly.
So I think, yeah, I think fantastic data. I think that is a good picture for us to set the context for the panel as well. I'm going to switch gear to Angkor, because we mentioned a lot about account opening and a lot of people going as a new user right now in this digital age, or because of COVID, right? So Angkor, when we look at the underserved and unbanked population, so underserved could mean they have a bank account, but you're not really utilizing that very much. How do you identify the person or onboard them into the system? Angkor?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Jenna. It's actually a good question. And see, the thing is that where it starts from is what your target segment is. That's how we begin, right? So people talk about underserved, people talk about unbanked, but what do really underserved and underbanked means, and what is the target segment that as an organization or as an institution you're looking at, right? Follow that with the product, right? So there have been a lot of banks, mostly all banks have tried to serve the lower bracket of the strata, right? But again, the product fit is not there. So how we do normally is that, and when we started way back 3.5 years, was that we were very clear on where we want to focus on. So we had identified ourselves as an opportunity where we think that this particular bracket segment is not served. They do not have the financial products as per fitting into their requirement. So that's where we started working on, right? So be it on lending product, where we wanted to know that what exactly are their requirements, why do they need funds, what exactly is it serving them, right? If you talk about micro SME, do they need in ringgit terms, do they need 20,000 ringgit loan, or do they need 2,000 ringgit loan, right? When do they need it? Are we servicing their requirement when they need it, or are we also going to be taking up the time to deliver them that product, right? And switching on to insurance again, insurance for all of us, including us, right? It's always the last priority, right? But how do we make this product interesting for them? How can we make this product affordable for them? And how can we deliver them, right? So once you identified your segment, which we did, and fortunately with Exiata, we had the right assets in place. So which means that we had enough database of our existing customer across our opcos that we could identify a certain segment of customers to really offer them those micro loans and micro insurance products, right? So once we knew that we needed a product which does not compete with bank, or we needed a product where just take an example of lending, right? If I know that I am only dealing with customers who need up to say 10,000, from 500 ringgit to 10,000, where are these customers? And then second is, what kind of a data is available for this customer for me to evaluate, right? I cannot have a traditional approach with these set of customers because there is no history available, right? As a financial institution, I would like to look at the balance sheet, profit and loss account, or at least bank statement. But we all know these are all cash merchants, right? Cash SMEs who deal in cash. They do not have any such facilities available. So how do we really offer them is again the second question that we always answer, right? How do I evaluate whether he's eligible or not? How do I ensure that my risk is minimized? There are not frauds. So that's where the alternate lending model, the AI models come in place, where we use third-party data. We use the data which is available through the verified sources, and we try and assess whether the customer is right or not, right? So that's where your assessment is. And the third part is, which is very important, and which is the one that you are also asking, is how do you deliver it? How do you ensure that, oh, you have the customer, you have the product, but is it going to the right segment, right? And that's where we have to identify what is the best model to reach out to them. So when we were doing our POC before we did a commercial launch, we tried to model around a lot of models which were existing in the different part of the world, right? But then we focused on that we want to be completely digital, which means that we want this product to be available only through a digital platform. But we knew that we cannot go via app, because not everybody wants to download app. And this is not a product that you would need every day in life, right? Once in 6 months or once in a year, right? So we wanted to give a customer experience that it should be easily accessible. He should be able to get when he needs it, which is where our 3-minute journey works in. So today you log in, You just go through the journey for 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, you will know whether you're eligible or not, and you walk out with the money if you're eligible, right? So the digital whole experience to the customer is the key here, and that's how we try and deliver that. Similarly, on insurance, what we wanted is that we want a product to be on the go product. I don't want to restrict myself to continue to pay any insurance company for 12 months. I'm just going for a limited period travel, right? I need it only for 2 days. I need it only for 3 hours, right? So those specific use cases, and how can that be delivered again is digital, right? Click of a button, I should have it, and I should be able to avail it. So that's how the entire journey works on, from the product identification to customer identification and the delivery of the product.
Thanks, Uncle. I think that covers quite a huge breadth of what of services or the products that you have undergone. Obviously, you've also undergone the customer discovery as well, to see whether how you're going to serve them better without sometimes the data that is required by traditional means. So maybe I'll also ask Gabriel and also Andanta, right? Because Gabriel, for example, how do you onboard those who are normally underserved or unbanked? Because I think, Gabriel, you also cover outside of Malaysia as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting story. We kind of saw this happen in the Philippines last COVID, right? So with the Philippines, there's a lot of underserved, underbanked as well. So they typically don't have bank accounts or traditional bank accounts as well. So the government was trying to figure out, how do I disperse the COVID aid effectively, right? And still ensure that people don't apply for it multiple times. So they realized that the mobile phone penetration was quite big. So what they did was start with multiple e-wallet vendors, right? And providers in Philippines, and they would disperse that aid out from there. And then how did they ensure that the person didn't reapply and they didn't over disperse the aid? They use biometrics with likeness, right? So during enrollment, they would get the 3D face map, the biometric face map on file, right? And then they would track that, okay, I dispersed it to this biometric face map. And when the person tried to apply for aid a second time, and if he or she wasn't eligible, right, then there would be sort of what we call a one-to-end face match of a notification, and then on the back end, they would reconcile it. So that was quite interesting on how they actually got COVID aid out to the underserved in the Philippines. So that was an interesting use case.
Thanks, Gabriel. What about Andanta? What do you see, for example, in Indonesia? You will have experience for Indonesia market as well. What are your thoughts, Andanta?
So I think whether you're, by the way, I completely agree with Encore as well as Gabriel, right? I think the topic is a main challenge for all of us here in ASEAN that we're trying to solve, if not globally, right? Less than 20% of the population in emerging Southeast Asia markets, Indonesia, Malaysia, are either unbanked or underserved. So then as a company, what sort of data points or methods can we incorporate to serve those populations? And with this population, you have to keep in mind, right? Even let's take an example, Indonesia, they're more likely not to have a credit card because credit card penetration is low. There's no FICO or Pefindo credit score or any other authoritative checks available to them. And I think now more than ever, we realize that we need to change the way we look at digitally identifying these individuals. So for example, MasterCard, Ikata has just been actually acquired by MasterCard, wants to onboard 1 billion individuals within 5 years to the digital platform. So how can we do that in ASEAN regions with minimum to no data, especially for this population? So there are digital footprints that we can be focusing on, right? If they don't have a credit score or they don't have credit history, etc. There are emails, phone numbers, IP, for example. And when you're coupling those sort of attributes with a dynamic network data, right? We're actually able to identify these individuals that your companies are trying to onboard, basically frictionless, but most importantly, securely. So even if you have no Pefindo score, we can look at the behavioral patterns and insights your attributes within a phone number, for example, is showing. No banking history, no worries. We can actually look at the name and link to the actual, for example, physical address to prove that they are that person living in that address for X amount of times to prove their identity, right? So being unbanked or underserved does not mean they're not a good, viable customer. I think we need to change the way we approach authentication, especially within these regions, so that we can have enough data and understanding to identify and approve these good potential customers that cannot be done conventionally, essentially.
Thanks, Adanta. And I think it's also diversifying that approach, like what you mentioned, and revamping the perspective, I guess, even the onboarding side or serving them as a customer. So I'm going to switch gear a little bit.
Tina, so sorry, I just want
Yep.
to. I'm pretty excited when someone talks about Indonesia, right? We've got some success stories, and so just to add one incident right here. So actually, what Ananda said was absolutely right. It's not about looking at someone, you tell whether the person is the right customer or not, or a fraud or not. It's not that. So the first loan that we did in way back in Indonesia when we were launching Indonesia was for $45. $45 for 7 days, right? And everybody was quite amazed that you can get a $45 loan for 7 days. So who was the customer? The customer was a mom and pop shop, which sells the recharge coupon, right? So the customer comes within the community, they come and they buy a recharge coupon. And how we made that possible was looking at the whole chain of distribution, right? Who is this customer associated closely with? Right? Where does this customer, and this is a lady, by the way, who was running that shop. How do you really ensure that you are trying to work with someone where she's dependent on her bread and butter, right? So she can default, but she will never default to something which is earning her a bread and butter, which is the distributor who's selling her the coupons, right? So that's where the whole build up happened for us, right? So we approached distributors and then we built an ecosystem where granting her the loan for a specific use. So what is important is if you, especially as a lender, do I know what is the specific use of that product, and is it a productive loan or is it not, right? So what I was trying to come at here is that sometimes as an institution we also need to look at, if you're very clear on what we want to do. I mean, one could be that we don't want to serve it, we can't do that. The other is what are the ways that we can really serve them. And Indonesia is a true example. Unbanked, I mean, 95%, right? In that definition, right? They don't
Yes.
have, right? Till date, schemes like MasterCard, Visa, they find it challenging, right? But someone like P2P is working there largely, right? And serving the micro SMEs, giving them $45 loan for a 7-day business rotation is something that really was a commendable effort from our side to kind of deliver that product. Yeah. So I think this particular this part of the world, right, especially Indonesia, Philippines, these products are really products that the customer need. And trust me, our NPLs are almost zero in this market, and we are dealing only with this community, right? So yeah, data and the security around data really plays a lot of has a good play or a secure play here in our field.
Thanks, Uncle. I think that's fantastic data, and also really giving a real use case that people actually are really served, not just discarding their needs and say they're not our target segment. So I think that's a very also inclusive perspective into moving to a digital society in the end, right? Whether or not they come from a different segments of the market. So I think thanks, Uncle and Andanta, for a very interesting perspective on Indonesia. So I want to switch gear a little bit, and I want to pull in Charmaine, Heather, and Gabriel for this. So machine and human element, there's always that perspective or that balance in combating risks and threats, right? In your experience, what is recommended? Is there any use case or something that you see in the region? So maybe I'll pass this to Heather first.
Yeah, so I think in this sort of day and age where we're really like a smartphone generation, we process a huge amount of data internally, externally, customers demands instant gratification and speed. And actually the profit margins are not necessarily higher despite all of the customer demands, right? And then at the same time, criminals are getting more sophisticated and there are more regulatory demands. So to that point, it is important to rely on machines to a certain extent. The machines can play a huge part in helping us to gather a lot of the internal and external data that we have. If we look at, sanctions and watch list data alone, there are over 1,000 different official lists that regulated industries have to stay on top of. And then if you're looking at internal data, like the multiple sort of transaction data points a customer may have if they've been with you for over a year and then made many transactions, how can we tie all the information together to create a risk profile, right? So machines still play a huge part, not just in the data collection process, but also in how it analyzes the data, how it makes sense of it, and informs the company or alerts the company of any kind of threats. But at the same time, there is human expertise that cannot be replaced. So I'll give a couple of examples. We talked about the COVID pandemic having a huge catalyst, being a huge catalyst, right, for growth. But at the same time, there are a lot of new methodologies of crimes that have evolved from this. It's projected that in 2020 alone, there was about $32 billion that was lost as a result of fraud. And this number is expected to rise about 40 billion in the next 5 years or so. Off the back of that, we're also seeing that criminals are, and very unfortunately, to the point earlier about the unbanked population, actually making use of this population, people who are unemployed, been impacted by COVID, or teens maybe spending a lot more time homeschooled and online, and actually trying to steal their identity or buying their identity in exchange for quick cash, right? Those kinds of activities may not necessarily be easily detected through machines. There is still a certain level of human intervention that is required to see if a teenage girl is transacting slightly differently, from the profile that was signed up. And I think it's very important to gather information at the point of when a customer is being onboarded to make sure that you're not just getting basic biodata information, but trying to understand their sort of transaction profile, how they're expected to behave in their relationship with you. I'll just give another quick example as well, which is I think everyone has probably seen in the news in 2020 that Westpac was fined $1.2 billion for a lot of AML lapses. But the backstory this was that actually there were hundreds of transactions that were made by Westpac customers with telltale signs of overseas child exploitation. What that looked like was funds being transferred to the Philippines, and then followed by travel to the Philippines, right? So as a result of that, actually about 3,000, children and individuals were unfortunately subjected to child exploitation. But these things, again, would rely on a certain level of human intervention and expertise to detect. So I really think it's a combination of using machines to take on the work that humans shouldn't be wasting time on, and then allowing the experts to come in and do deeper analysis.
Thanks, Heather. I think that is a very good example. If we don't manage the identity and transaction threats, what possibly could happen and impacting society as well. So maybe I could also ask Charmaine to actually give some examples or some experience that you want to share on this.
Okay, I don't have an extensive case study on this, but what I can say is I can tell you a story. I have a friend who's pretty wealthy, who's basically wanted to actually get a large amount of loan from an ex-bank, okay? I wouldn't say which bank. But what happened was his loan was actually declined, right? But what I'm trying to say is that, okay, he actually have children in Australia. And the reason why he's taking out a loan is because he wants to use the loan to fund his children's education in Australia. So what I'm trying to say is that if you are a machine, you may not know extensively what sort of like business my friend is into and what sort of like funds he has with like other banks or in other like trusts or whatever, that sort of thing as well. So I have to agree what Heather has actually mentioned earlier. It is really important to have both aspects from a a machine perspective and also from a human element. So for example, if you are the relationship manager of my friend, then you will understand what is happening in terms of his lifestyle, and whether is it legit for him to actually ask for a loan because he just sent his children to Australia, and he actually needed some quick funds to actually pay for the children's education. It's actually really as simple as that. There are a lot of things that the nuances that the machine won't be able to tell or won't be able to read. So I think, to answer your question, right, it is really important to have, both of the elements to be in place together so that you also do not miss out things that, sometimes for us as a human being, right, we might actually miss out from from identifying like certain like patterns or whatever. Yeah.
Thanks, Charmaine. I think that is very human, our day-to-day, human life, where sometimes we miss machine will not be able to pick up certain human perspective or insight. And Gabriel, what about do you have anything to share on this question?
Yeah, for sure. I think completely agree with Heather and Shameen, but if I were to add on a couple of stuff that we saw, right? On the human element, I think it's important to look at the limitations, as what everybody has mentioned, of AI machine, right? If I were to relate it back to what we saw in the fraud aspect, for instance, right? Somewhere last year, in a couple of the ID cards, we kind of saw how syndicates figured out how computer vision technology works. So computer vision technology in very layman terms, you kind of look at different data points, check whether, for example, a watermark is in the right size, in the right color, right font, is a hologram sticker there or not on your different ID cards. So your computer vision technology will say, hey, it's in the right color, right space, it's an eagle, for example, and it's true, right? The syndicates kind of figure out how that works, and instead of printing high quality counterfeit cards, they printed the sticker overlay. Very cheap. A couple of dollars for a couple of thousand. They pasted it over, and it all went through, right? So that was something that we picked up because of our hybrid approach from one of our verification experts, and we immediately informed, and it's happened in Hong Kong, by the way. We informed Hong Kong MA of that. So that is the important element of it, right? And if we were to take analogy, which what one of our colleagues in June likes to mention, is the analogy of Iron Man or Robocop, right? It's the idea of augmented intelligence, where you have machines, technology to help enhance the capabilities of humans, whether it's to have alerts coming out in transaction monitoring or AML risk, or alerts coming out in looking at contrast, schema, or changes on high quality Photoshop instances of ID cards or deepfakes, for instance. So that is that marry of AI and humans together to essentially battle fraud.
Thanks, Gabriel. And I think people will remember the Iron Man and Robocop analogy. So I think what you mentioned about picking that up and highlighting to a regulator, I think that's very good data for them as well, an insight for them to also join the battle to understand what the criminals are doing or fraudsters are doing outside. So I'll switch to Anko, and I think as Axiata is actually part of the bidding for digital bank license in Malaysia. Why do you think Aspirasi or Axiata has all the boxes ticked, for example, right? What is the journey that Aspirasi went through / Axiata went through, Anko, that maps out to bidding the application as a digital bank in Malaysia? Floor is yours, Anko.
Sure. But can I just go back to the previous question and just give my
yeah, sure, definitely.
Some inputs, right? And this is purely from what we're doing, right? For us, I think machine learning or the whole AI has been quite fruitful, and it also depends on which segment again, because we're focusing on underserved, right? We need these technology because if we have the traditional approach, we'll never not be able to serve them profitably, right? We still have the agenda that we have to be positive, right? So I guess that it also depends on which segment of a customer you are trying to target at and which particular model is the right model. So for us, the machine learning has really been working well, and which is also kind of reflective of the portfolio that we built in. So just wanted to give my few cents on what we have, right? Because mostly our base is around underserved and unbanked. Yeah. So coming back to the question, Jenna, that you kind of just posed. Actually, it's a journey, right? It didn't happen overnight that we wanted to apply for a digital bank. this journey started way back, almost 3.5 years back, 4 years back, right? And we were preparing for this once it opens up, right? And we have very seasoned senior leadership team in Axiata, which is kind of which had that vision that where is that we want to peg ourselves on, especially on the financial services side, and which is a target segment that we want to approach at. So when we started, when I joined Axiata to set up Esperasi, we already had established brand which is Boost. And we all know Boost is one of the largest e-wallet in Malaysia, right? Which caters to a certain segment of customers, right? But when the mandate was given to me, was that we want to work on something which is focusing only on the underserved and unbanked, right? We do not want to compete with the traditional banks, or we don't want to compete with the P2Ps, which are for targeting medium size or proper SMEs, right? So it was very clear what we wanted to do. And the reason why we wanted to do is we wanted to look at future, where we want to peg our financial services assets to, where do we want to take them, right? And the direction was very clear that we wanted to look at when it opens up in Malaysia, because we were learning from other countries how the digital bank piece has evolved, right? When it opens up, we should be ready, right? So the whole the journey has taken us few years to kind of like you use the word tick the boxes here. So it started with again starting from what does digital bank do? What are the target segment that they serve? Now, if we have underserved and underbanked, then how do we start with, right? What are the products that we want to have expertise on, which can be offered again through a digital platform? Because digital bank is digital bank. We're not talking about any branches here, right? So what are the products that we should be able to deliver to them? And what is the experience that we have by the time we reach as a bank, that enough capabilities digitally, technologically, product innovations, team experience, that we should say that yes, we are ready for it. So that's where it is. And for any bank, if you look at their balance sheets, largely it's around assets, right? So lending constitute to larger part of their books. Insurance contributes to large part of their fee income, right? So we were there. So we said that yes, this is the segment that we want to play with. Let's launch micro lending. Let's launch micro insurance. Let's get on board this customer. Let's have some experience in onboarding, right? So the first year of that journey, which is 2018, was primarily to work this as a project, launch it, experience it, and then commercialize it. So 2019 is when we started commercializing it, launching in 2 countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, and 2020 is actually the scale up phase for us, where we really gone all the way up. And fortunately for us, this whole last 1.5 years of COVID has been extremely good because, of course, people need funds, right? But because our focus was productive loans, which means we wanted to support the micro SMEs. So we had developed the ecosystem where we can reach out to, like I said, distributor model, going with people who have data, which is very important for us, right? So we tried and build the whole ecosystem around reaching out to the end consumer through the partner approach, more as a B2B model approach. So today, when we look at it, we are working with everybody. We're working with Lazada, Food Panda, all large FMCG distributors, Farm Fresh. So you name it, and those are all part of it. And who are the ones who are benefiting? Are those small mom and pop shops, are those individual enterprises, right? Those are the ones who are benefiting out of it, because now they have payment terms. Now they are able to buy stock and pay after once the sale is done, right? So this whole journey, when this opened up on the digital banking side, and when Bank Nagara came out with the whole list of the things that they were looking at from a digital bank perspective, we somehow were almost ticking box on 90% of it, right? Because we already had experienced it. Now today, and the submission just happened a couple of days back, 30th June was the last day. And if we look at today, and I'm just saying this right now here, if you look at from where we are, I feel that we are ahead in terms of the other competition. Why? Because we already have that going. We already have enough experience delivering those products digitally and to the right segment, right? So yes, the whole journey for Axiata to be where we are right now, and Esperasi is the one which is leading up for the digital bank. It's quite well knitted, well thought through, and well structured journey. And now we are ready. I mean, we whenever we want, we can just switch on and move on. So that's the kind of a confidence that the whole team has, and including the leadership team, that we are now ready for the next leap that we have.
Thanks, Uncle. And I think it's good to actually start early and gather all the experience. Just that rather than just saying that, I just want to apply a digital bank, I just want to serve all this market, without really knowing the segment, without really knowing the micro SMEs needs, right? I think it takes a lot of courage actually, because you're going into an area where a lot of people won't go into, and a lot of people sometimes say that it's expensive, it is an unknown area. So I think we look forward for Aspirasi's and Axiata's outcome of the application. And switching gear towards maybe Heather, how do we protect against threats if we have no data, like literally zero? I think we covered a little bit, but I think we didn't hear from Heather. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, there will always be some form of data available, right? Both internally or externally. And if the company was really lacking of data at this point in time, then it's really never too late to start, right? To first establish a framework for gathering data from the point of when you enter into a customer relationship, looking at some things like their, of course, identity information, the way they intend to transact, their basic biodata information, and then really grow that data from then on. The more data points you have, the easier it is to do further analysis. At the same time, if there is also a lack of data at this point in time, you could consider benchmarking them against peer groups. So a company of a similar size, country, industry, and then try to benchmark them against their own peer group, where you may have existing data, and then of course using external data.
Thanks, Heather. And I think Andanta, do you have anything to add on this?
No, I think I will jump on for the next one.
Actually, I've got something to add on to that, Jenna.
Great, Sherman.
Yeah, so I have to agree with Heather at that, there's actually, you can't really say there's no data that's out there. There's actually going to be some form of data. And if you look at how Ant Financial started their business, they started with nothing, right? But if you look into the whole, ecosystem play they have actually built over the years, this is how, they start going into like microfinancing. They analyze the data from, people using their app by, commuting, by buying stuff online, by transacting or whatever. So it's what I'm trying to say is that it's really important to have that, also have the ecosystem play where you can actually build meaningful data, to actually build your business from there. But even so, if you don't really have any data to begin with, there are third-party data out there in the market, right, that you can actually refer to. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Shermaine. And I think some of our panelists have also covered this previously in some of the examples. So I'll jump on to the last two questions. The war against cyber crimes and fraud is really on the rise, right? While we can say that COVID is a catalyst for digitalization, everyone going digital, everyone is in a digital space for individuals and businesses. But then it also means that cyber crimes and cyber frauds are also on the rise. So what are principles and approach do you use when you look at this? Maybe we can pass it to Andanta first.
Sorry, Jenna. Can you repeat that one again?
Yep. So we're saying that the war against cyber crimes and cyber frauds are increasing.
Okay.
So even though when you mentioned about the 40 million accounts, right? But it also means that the dark side is also rising. So what is the approach that you think that we should use? Yeah.
Sorry, I thought it was the other question. Okay, so I do have an answer for this one as well. Actually, when it comes to principles and approach, it's honestly, I would just keep it to two. It's quite simple, but effective, right? And that's really education, keeping everyone in the company educated around emerging threats and cybercrime and fraud can change really quickly and in minutes actually, because the attack that you're getting tomorrow or the next day is not the same as what you had today. And last but not least, risk management that is proactive, attacks that has happened before, looking at others that are a big cybercrime, for example. They're all changed, they're all evolving. So we have to be one step ahead of them. So education as well as risk management.
Thanks, Adanta. And any thoughts on this, Charmaine?
I actually have to agree with Andanta, and I guess, working in the financial sector, right? I think as I mentioned earlier, we get hacks every day. And I think if you guys remember, not so long ago, a lot of major banks in Malaysia was hacked and was asked for ransomware. But because of the proactiveness that we actually practice within the organization, right? So to be honest, we are not affected. As in, we are not affected as in to the point that we have to pay ransomware. Of course, we're affected, but not to the point that, like I said, we have to pay ransomware. So, it's about really education, but not only to consumers, but also to employees.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So there is a lot of like reminders, that obviously you don't click on like phishing links, do not share your password. I mean, it may sound very trivial and very basic, but having said that, people will still sometimes fall for this kind of things for some strange reason.
No, I absolutely agree. Yeah.
Exactly.
I just want to give an example, and this is a real life one. So my ex-colleague, I think if she's here listening to this, she'll laugh. But she actually fell for a phishing for like an OTP code. Because she thought it was an old woman on WhatsApp. And so she got hacked, and so did a bunch of our friends as well, because then they impersonated or took over the account, or what we call as an account takeover, and essentially has taken everyone else's OTP and hacked them. So it really is so close to home. And it can just be that one time that you think is, you thought it was a nice, friendly grandma. Education and continuously being up to date is just really important. Stay vigilant at all times. I completely agree with Charmaine.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Charmaine, Adanta. And what about Gabriel? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, agree with both of them so far. I think what I would add is really about sharing of information as well. If you look at the type of frauds that have happened, right, it's evolved from FedEx, DHL to the TOTS to the police, right, to the TeamViewer fraud as well. So if you look at it, it's about sharing of information. And what I've heard from my friends in the compliance and risk space as well is the syndicates tend to jump around, right? So they'll look at different payment providers, for instance, if they want to attack one. So it could be the company A today, and then after that company B, then company C, right? And it's all the exact same type of attacks and techniques that they use, right? And then it's to build up defenses, whether it's foundational ones or stopgap measures, and it just keeps something like that. So the sharing of information is really quite important, whether it's within the community or whether it's from the regulator side or whether it's from the law enforcement side. So, for example, in Singapore, they have a law enforcement community, right, that is in contact with all different payment providers, fintech players in the market to share what type of fraud they've been seeing, right, and to have open communication to try and stop it as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Thanks, Gabriel. Heather, any thoughts on this?
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think we're all very aligned here. In fact, I actually had written on my notes, exactly what Ananta said also about staying vigilant. It is so important to stay on top of things, stay up to date. But just a couple of things I would add. There are always going to be new typologies released, new white papers written, right? But just being able to adopt a risk-based approach to understanding which ones are applicable to your business and which ones require you to take action, as opposed to, just trying to build everything for all kinds of risks. But the second thing that I wanted to add is just in looking at how you can keep your processes as flexible and agile as possible to adapt to these changes, right? This goes through processes and systems that you look to put in place, and it's just so important that these things can reflect regulatory, business, and changes in the risk environment.
Thanks, Heather. And Uncle, any comments or experience that you want to share?
No, nothing for me. I guess I just go by what the ladies are saying. Actually, that's true. So we just have to be vigilant, right? So it goes for all of us. It doesn't come with, I mean, anyone can be fooled with that, right? So it's very important that we keep our data safe, secure, and especially the security passwords and everything we have to be very careful about.
Thanks, Uncle. And I think last questions for everyone, right? So what do you look forward to being this side of the wall, or this side of the wall against fraud and threats, and identity and transaction threats? Maybe we'll start with you, Uncle.
I don't have much on this. Maybe I'll just pass it to others.
Heather?
Yeah, as an organization, I mean, aside from us saying that compliance doesn't have to be painful, actually our other sort of internal tagline is that, superheroes don't have to wear capes, right? I think in a lot of what we do as a company, and for me personally as well, throughout my career, wanting to be a part of this risk and compliance space is really in just seeing how the entire market and then each one of us plays a part. Years ago, and even up to say a couple of years ago, and in some markets within ASEAN, up to last year, digital asset regulations didn't exist at all, right? But we are always growing as a community. The regulators as well are, doing their best to enhance the entire regulatory framework. And so I think we all play a part, and I'm just super sort of happy and take comfort in being a part of this entire community, working towards crushing the bad guys, right? And I have complete faith that using technology, all coming together and pulling all our collective effort together, we will succeed, and hopefully the projected 40 billion loss in fraud in 5 years from now, like where that number is not going to happen, right? And that we're going to get on top of that.
Thanks, Heather. What about Gabriel?
I think coming from a very personal perspective, it's about being safer from just doing what I do, right? Whether it's buying something off an e-commerce website or opening a bank account. I think after I've been in this compliance RegTech space, I become a lot more aware that I'm hearing about transacting through a payment provider, for instance, that doesn't have transaction monitoring or AML or some form of monitoring or risk framework in place. I'm like, that could be a little bit dangerous as well, right? So I think it's, for me personally, being able to transact, carry out day to day, knowing that my transactions, my identities are being protected, and also look forward to really staying ahead of fraudsters. Because so far the fraudsters have been very, very smart in terms of how to evolve their scams, I would say. So I really look forward to the point of the day where we're way ahead of them and protecting everyone. Yeah.
Thanks, Gabriel. Adanta?
I think just the last bit for me, personally for me, because I'm the head of Indonesia and Malaysia, I'm Indonesian myself. So I have a lot of pride in ASEAN countries, and being at this part and being a part of ICATA and providing insights and products to help businesses specifically within Malaysia and Indonesia is such a big thing for me. So I'm really excited to be in this part to see where the development of most of the companies in Indonesia, Malaysia, as well as ASEAN grow, especially when it comes to cybersecurity, fraud, essentially overall identity verification. So I'm excited to see, the fruits of our labor.
Thanks, Adanta. And lastly, Charmaine?
I just gotta say that I think, it's going to be a very interesting phase for everyone. And if you look at like the amount of DG banks that's going to be coming into this region, what I'm trying to say is that I think, the fraudsters will get more and more creative. Not to say I'm looking forward to all these organizations being hacked, but what I'm trying to say is that obviously, the more challenges they are, the more that we need to actually build up our strength. So I think there's definitely going to be a lot of like exciting things happening in the market. Yeah.
Thanks, Charmaine. And I think that wraps up our webinar panel session. I'll pass this back to Fang. Thank you. Thanks, panelists.
Wow, what a good session. Very good, very interesting. Obviously, we all learned a lot. At this junction, there's three things actually that's going to happen from now. I invite all of you to turn on your video cameras right now to take a picture with our panelists. So please join us on stage, and we're going to do a group session picture right now. After this, it's going to be followed by a breakout session, so you can ask your questions directly to the panelists. There's going to be a number of rooms, and we're going to do a lucky draw where there will be 3 prizes. So you can go on ahead and turn on your camera. I much appreciate that. It's COVID and there's lockdowns, and we need a little bit of cheer in our step. So come on, socialize and turn on that camera with us. Join us on stage. Bring your cat, bring your pigeon if you want to put that on your shoulder. Feel free to join us. Brilliant. We're getting Jay. You might have to push the screen protector a little bit. Welcome, Nora. Good to see you. 1-842092949. Would love to have you as well. Maybe that's a great 4D number that we can buy after this. But make sure you wear your mask when you go over to the Toto place, all right? Big smiles, look straight into the camera. Brilliant, I got the first page. Just bear with me for the moment. This is also great because what we'll be doing for this is use this for the verification of the lucky draw after this, right? So if you didn't turn on your camera, we know you're not really over there. This is going to be from Nicholas to Tasneem. Great to have you, Nazli. Good, you turn on your cameras. Now's a great time to do it. Welcome, Timothy. Alice, Jane, Cor, if you'd like to join us, that'll be fantastic. Catch you. Big smiles into the camera lens. Brilliant. And that's it. So we're going to open up the rooms now. These are the breakout rooms that's going to be available on the top side of your menu bar. If you can look for that on the top panel, you should find the breakout sessions. Just in between meeting and help, you see breakout sessions. We're going to put all the speakers and panelists into their respective rooms. And if you've got any questions with Jumio or Ikata or Comply Advantage, Aspirasi or Maybank on what they're doing in the digital space to protect the identities, if you want to have any cybersecurity questions, Fort Ninja's got a booth there as well. Of anything related to share guide in terms of membership, Mr. Wu is going to be in his breakout room as well. Please join us over there. For the next 20 minutes, we'll then adjourn, head to the lucky draw after this for the draw. So make your way, choose your breakout sessions, and you can proceed with breakout session, join breakout session. There'll be a list. Session number 1 is Maybank, followed by Axiata, Ikata, Jumio, Share Guide, Fort Ninja, and then Comply Advantage in room 7. Yeah, so those are 7 rooms. Feel free to join them and ask your questions.
Where do I sign in? Sorry. Sorry, I can't hear you.
So if you look at the top menu bar, there'll be file, edit, share. Right at the end of that, there's breakout sessions. And if you click on that, you can click join a breakout session. Axiata is in room number 2. And feel free to hop around and change rooms where necessary, if you want to meet other people as well. So the way you do this is on the top same area, you click on the leave breakout session.
If you're using a phone, is it the same also on the top?
If it's on the phone, no. I think you might have to click on the 3 buttons.
On the phone, there's no three. Okay. I don't think so. You have that option on the phone.
Okay. Well,
No worries.
I tell you what, since Angkor is over here, we'll use this main hall for Axiata. How about that? So anybody with any question for Axiata, Angkor, I'm putting you on the spot here, buddy.
I'm trying to search here. I can't find that. So yeah, I'll stay here.
Yes, stay here. This is Axiata's room. There we go. So Pun to I Ching to Amirul, anybody with questions on Axiata, Mr. Wu's here as well. If you want to know about Share Guide, their membership structures, now's a great, fantastic time to throw your questions out there. We're all friends here.
Hey, Uncle, this is
Fang and Angkor, can I ask a very generic question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to check, Angkor, is there any upcoming exciting projects or anything that will come from Axiata Digital soon?
Exciting project. I think the most exciting thing for us, all of us, especially on the financial services side, is the digital bank. So we are all looking forward to that. So all our efforts and work is around that. So yeah, that's something which I could share with you. But if you have anything specific in mind, you can definitely reach out to us. We can share our email IDs and we can have a conversation there as well. But yes, what we're looking at right now is specifically the digital banking piece. Does it answer you? Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
so,
And
Uncle,
we are also looking forward, I think, for the digital bank licenses.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Where are you from, Jessica? I know you're part, obviously, of the eFintech school, which we're running together.
I'm based in PJ, actually.
Okay. And what company do you represent?
Right now, I'm still representing NEM Group. It's a blockchain company, if you have heard of them.
Yes, definitely.
So right now, I'm still representing them. But this is my personal capacity.
Okay, very good, very good. And on Fort Ninja's side, we will be running a technical hackathon. So that's going to be purely for cybersecurity at the end of the year. It's going to be quite exciting because we've collaborating with the technical people, so programmers, cybersecurity experts, to run very exciting challenges that can be, I guess, a bit more fun with all these MCOs in Malaysia and all that. We decided, let's organize something where it's a bit of a treasure hunt, a bit of capture the flag, a bit of hack in the box, so that we can get I guess, make merry and earn some money in the process. So it's going to be a cash prize that's going to be put out there. Andy, good of you to join us on screen. How's your day so far? Anybody with any questions for Angkor, me, or Mr. Wu?
Yes. Hey, Fang. Well, Angkor, can you hear me? This is this is Poon here. Now I just missed out some of parts of the session just now, but from Axiata's standpoint, in terms of eKYC, right? Are you all still looking at how does Axiata collaborate? Because your local entity is Celcom Axiata. So in terms of collaboration between Celcom Axiata and Axiata as a group, are they so-called the same, or they are actually different in terms of operating structure, in terms of adoption of technology, in terms of execution of their eKYC solutions, their security solutions, etc.?
So basically we're all part of Exada family. So my business is part of Exada Digital Services, whereas Celcom sits as part of the telco assets that we have, right? So we have broad policies around all the areas that you spoke at the Exada group level. But when it comes to implementation, selection of the partners that they work with, we are pretty much independent. All these are independent units run by independent teams and headed by independent leadership. So we pretty much follow our own evaluation process guided by overall Axiata policy.
Okay, so basically Celcom Axiata is like a subsidiary of Axiata Holding Group itself.
Exada Bharat, yeah.
So then from the digital banking license itself, who is getting the license?
So Axiata Digital Services, which is part of Axiata Group, Berhad. So we have a holding company called Boost Holding, where Axiata Digital owns 88% and Great Eastern owns 22%. So it is the Boost, under Boost Holding is where we have all the financial services assets, be it Boost Wallet, Esperasi, Apigate, and also the digital bank. So digital bank sits out of the Boost Holding structure, right? So it is this structure which is taking and applying for the digital bank license. But which entity, what name, all those will be disclosed later on. But it is Boost Holding which is going in for a digital bank license.
Okay, so basically, so can I say that let's say if once Axiata is successful in getting the license itself, they can choose any partners to work with regards to the implementation or the rollout of their virtual branch or whatever. They might not be working with Celcom Axiata.
No. So the expertise requirement is completely different. Celcom has a different expertise requirement. We have different. So when you talk about virtual banking, technology, we're already in discussion with the partners, right? Who could provide us those expertise. So we're looking at those partners who have experience in delivering digital bank.
But the thing is that the Celcom network itself, it will be a very easier way to extend your branch, and actually, I would say in terms of monetize the assets that is parked under the Axiata Group.
Oh, absolutely. But the technology to manage the whole financial services business
will be independent.
Will be very different, yeah, because Celcom will be more where we can partner them and to their base we can provide financial services products, right? Be it digital bank, be it a lending, micro insurance, or wallet services. So that's always the what do you call it, the synergy that we keep on looking up within the opcos, within Exada opcos.
Okay. The reason is that because currently they have already, and I guess they would have already maybe 2 or 3 million customer, and that is your existing ready-based customer for your digital bank.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I guess the challenge is always trying to harmonize the operational team, all right, to cross-sell these services across the group itself.
That's what I mentioned in my, if you heard about the digital bank journey, right? So one of the things I mentioned was that last 3.5 years have been spent on kind of experiencing all this, right? So today when we stand, we've already done that. We already integrated. We already launched a couple of products, be it Celcom or Boost. So we have that experience. And as and when we have the digital bank, it'll be easier for us to kind of offer them those services as well.
Okay.
To their base.
Right. Maybe I'll touch base with you later. I've got some other questions because I don't want to hold up me doing the talking and then didn't give the chance for other people to so-called have a chat with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Andy, I think you're on mute.
Anku, Andy here. I understand you guys are partnering with RHP, right?
Yeah.
So how is that? What will RHP bring to the table versus what Axiata Group bring to the table?
So I can't I can't take many questions around the digital bank because we're still under the license, but not specifically for I'll not answer this specifically for this for RHB, but any partner that you would have in a consortium, right? So you bank on their expertise, right? RHB has been one of the leading banks in Malaysia. They have the expertise in terms of providing the whole banking infrastructure, regulatory framework. Whereas what we have expertise is delivering those products on the digital side, right? So there is a lot of synergy on how we can collaborate and work together and provide these products to the market. So that if that answers.
Yeah.
So it's all about what expertise we bring to the table here.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tan.
So if there are no other questions, maybe I'll continue in a sense. When Uncle,
Yep.
when you were saying that because this morning they had a session on the fintech, I think with Fintech Malaysia, Vincent Fong, where Axiata CEO was together with the RHB, I think the consumer banking or whatever head, which is Jeff Ng, right? So the question that that I have is now with this collaboration, does it? I guess it's maybe it's a sensitive question, but with this collaboration, does it mean that RHB or that will not have a digital bank on their own, or they will basically leverage on this entity?
So I can't really answer that, but what I can tell you is that for a traditional bank with that scale, and for any other partner, it's always when you're forming a part of consortium, you would want to leverage each other expertise here instead of reinventing the whole thing from scratch, right? So I guess this partnership is win-win for both of us, and if you come together, then definitely we would want to ride on each other expertise instead of creating independent structures, right? So we carry some expertise in delivering these products digitally. We have shown that successful model, and RHB is expert in running the banking infrastructure here in Malaysia, offering all innovative products. They have a digital vision, so that's where we both come together and try and deliver this to the end consumer.
Now, when you talk about the banking infrastructure, basically, I guess you're referring to the core banking solutions, etc.
Correct.
Now, question is that if isn't this just a rebadging of the services to just digitalize the front end, but the back end is still the Jurassic systems that they are currently saddled with?
Not at all. That doesn't, I mean, that banks are already doing, right? So mobile application is kind of exactly what you said. Today, I can access my RHB account using a mobile application. I guess it's much beyond.
But that is the front end. It's not the so-called middle. That's the front end connecting to a middle end, not the back end.
Yeah.
But
so what we basically what we're trying to deliver here is the segment that we're dealing with right now, which is again not right now within the banking focus area, right? And the way we're delivering the product digitally is something which is different, right? So on the technology, on other aspect, we're still working on. But yes, what I can say is that whatever is published is that this relationship is kind of a nice blend of an organization who has a credibility of running a bank in Malaysia, and the way we delivering the same product digitally, right? Mostly on the asset side.
Are you all looking at using a solution provider, like for some sort of a banking as a service type of platform this?
I'm sure we will, but that has been driven by the technology team on our side. Yeah.
Okay. So that part of the digital banking group is managed by your tech team together with RHP.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, right. Because the challenge that I mean, recently I heard, I guess you heard of the RHP fiasco.
Yeah, that's what. So maybe I'll restrict my discussions to what I know, and
Because Fang was saying we are among friends here, so I have to raise this question. You see?
No. So I'm not. I don't even know much about it. So maybe we'll restrict the discussion to the forum here. Yeah.
Understand. No, because
let's stick to the identity and transaction threats questions.
Yeah.
Correct. So with regards to this, in terms of the so-called eKYC, the solution, the identity threats, are you all following certain international standards or prescribed proven solutions that is adopted internationally?
So I'm not the right guy to answer this, but we have our tech security team who works closely. And what I know definitely is that Axiata follows group wide. We follow the international standards and the standards which are locally applicable here, and that is what we follow. So we have a very strong security team, and also the tech built up is around that.
Yeah,
but I do not know anything beyond that.
Understand. Okay, because the thing is that our local regulators is still how should I say, formulating their framework on the security part of things.
Yeah.
So I wonder, in terms of how would you all approach that, because it's a bit like a chicken and egg.
Yeah.
Which one comes first?
Yeah, sure. So if there's anything specific, then we can have a offline discussion. You can always connect to me, and I can try and connect you to the other team members who are dealing with it to give you more understanding. If there's any area of interest that you have on working with us, definitely can be explored as well. And I can connect you to the right people.
All right, great.
Very cool. Mr. Wu, how much time left have we got for the breakout session?
The breakout session about the end already, less than a minute.
Okay. Good. Then we'll get to the lucky draw straight after, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, welcome back. I believe that's everyone back into the main session hall. I see all the speakers over here, so that's good. We're going straight into the lucky draw session right now. To qualify for this, you need to be a Share Guide member. And I'll get PL to kick this off with the spinning wheel. Just hold on for a moment while we get things set up. Alice, I think your...
Okay, are we ready? Okay, let's do the first number.
Okay. This is number 17.
Let me check. Mohammed Nazli, Agrobank.
Muhammad Nazli,
Are you here? Yeah, just acknowledge a yes in the chat group.
Just say yes in the chat group or turn on your video and say hello. Oh, Nazli, there we go.
Got that?
Yes.
Okay. We'll be in touch with you for your prize.
Okay, very good. Next one.
Yeah, let's do the second one.
Number 38. I feel I am Vienna White. Right?
David Chan. Is
David Chan. David Chan, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
I see. Are you here, David?
Yep.
Brilliant. Can you acknowledge on the chat, please? Brilliant. And the last one.
Last one. We only have 3 prizes.
Wheel of Fortune. Big money, big money. Number 50.
Hey, this one is Alice.
Ah,
Alice.
there you go, Alice.
Okay. Good.
Yay. Brilliant. And that was very straightforward. Very cool to have everybody over here. Thank you very much. We're going to go for the closing remarks now from Share Guide. Mr. Wu, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Well, it's been a long day, but I'm sure all of us have must have found some fruitful knowledge from today's session. As usual, all the threads out there are getting more and more genuine. Even me also, having some technical background, is facing difficulty with certain emails and certain attachments, and even knowing that these people are trying all kinds of tricks in the world, Facebook lah, what lah, they are trying all kinds of means to attack us. So we having heard from today's experts, so let's stay safe, doubly safe from COVID and safe from all these threats. So having said that, thank you everybody for your time in today's session. We hope that you have found all these knowledge beneficial and gain a lot from today's session from our experts. Once again, we thank you for your time in attending our session today, especially our panelists, Andanta, Heather, Charmaine, Anko, Gabriel, and last but not least, our co-organizer, Jenna and Ryan for assisting. Thank you to all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Wu. If you have any inquiries about membership, please reach out to Mr. Wu. Jenna, any last final words for Fort Ninja?
Again, thank you to Shega and all the panelists. We will be sending a copy of the recording and slides over. So stay tuned and watch out for email and notification as well. So thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Please take care. And all the best for everyone. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you all.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Thanks,
Thanks.
panelists.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. Get
Bye.
jet.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.